Sam put that intro video together, and I was watching it, and I never really thought about it that way when Moses said, basically, who I am doesn't matter. I serve him I serve the I am who is, or something like that.
Right.
I don't remember the exact quote, but I thought it was like, that's an interesting point that he responded like that. Now, yes, of course, he was saying, I'm the man, I'm not important. God's the one who's important, but because of that, he knew how to answer the world power because he had been charged with murder of an Egyptian. And by not naming himself, they had no jurisdiction.
Right, and it's two birds with one stone, really.
Right.
So, it's something, another way to think about that story, you know.
Which Moses may not have even known exactly what was going on. Now, you might kind of think he was because he was raised in the palace, but then again, it could have just been God saying, don't tell them who you are, just give my name. I'm the important one. But by doing that, God was protecting him.
Right.
Well, Sam and I, as we have researched this, a lot of the different people like David-Sidney, Dean Clifford, Aaron Russo even talked a little bit about it, I think.
Actually, that was something I'm glad you brought up Aaron Russo, because Aaron Russo's film Freedom to Fascism doesn't really make sense completely until you add this factor in.
Yeah.
Because Freedom to Fascism shows people literally being just invaded by the IRS. Just bam, but it's because they're contracted.
Right. The IRS has the legal right to be there.
Why isn't Zeitgeist explaining this issue?
Right.
There's a lot missing.
That's because Zeitgeist.
Well, come on.
Yeah. Anyway, well,
we know.
Zeitgeist will be a discussion some other time.
yeah, no doubt.
But yeah. So anyway, as we've studied this and I've looked at it, it has seemed to be the way that you should deal with the court system has been very complicated. You got to say certain things and be in certain places physically, and it's just, we've studied it and gone like, man, how could we ever get a handle on this? And then we finally got to talk to Paul Hansen, and you see, Paul Hansen also is really the first person who we've been able to talk to for verifiable information of how does this work in the United States. How does this function here?
Yeah, a lot of the people that we listen to, for me, Franco Collins, which I don't agree with him eschatologically at all, or really, I'm pretty sure he's got to be somewhere in the Unitarian crowd. But, I mean, he's from Australia, and then geographically, you have people like Dean Clifford and Rob Menard, I think his name is, and they're from Canada, and that's a different jurisdiction there.
And actually, this movement is quite big in Canada, especially Saskatchewan.
Right. Yeah, Free Manitoba.
Yep. Oh no, I'm sorry. You're right. Free Manitoba.
Yeah.
Not Saskatchewan.
And then there's another movie by, I can't remember. I think it's like Irene Moss Horse Graven or something like that, and she's part of the Squamish Nation, which is in Canada. It's this separate nation within Canada.
Yeah.
Which is interesting in itself. These names, we're just throwing them out there, but you can at least see that there are people doing things about this.
Right.
But
and part of the problem is, though, there's so many people with different opinions and different approaches, and we're looking at it going like, man, how can we? And Paul just simplified it so much.
Right.
And and you heard us asking about some of the stuff, and quite a few times he said, just don't go there. Just put the burden of proof on them.
Right.
What did he say the first time that he won in court? He went in, and the prosecutor asked him something, and he turned to the judge and said, I want proof of personal jurisdiction, or something along those lines. He gave the judge judicial notice of the legislative law, which is the only law, as you heard him explain, that is important.
Right.
Statute law, code, none of it applies. Legislative law is the one that matters and that the judge has to take heed of. So when he did that, the judge turned to the prosecutor and said, you need to prove personal jurisdiction. And, you heard him tell the story, do you have a driver's license? No, not that I'm aware of. What evidence do you have that I do? Do you have a social security number? No, not that I'm aware of. What evidence do you have that I do? And he had no evidence. He couldn't prove anything because Paul Hansen had signed an affidavit of sovereignty and handed it into the court, which, as you heard him say, it separated him from his social security card, his birth certificate, basically saying he no longer had those things. So by not using them and answering that way, the prosecutor had no grounds to charge him or to hold him, and the judge had to let him go. And that was just such a, it's so much more simpler, don't you think?
Oh yeah. And another thing, I
feel like there's light at the end of this tunnel.
Yes, me too. Actually, when we got done with that interview, it was very exciting for so many reasons. But one other thing that's a common belief in this whole movement is that your straw man is the uppercase name. Now, I think he even kind of alluded to the fact that it might not be just your uppercase name. I believe that. I think
we could say most commonly you see the strawman appear as the total uppercase name.
Right. And I'm definitely of the opinion from all the stuff that I've checked out that it's not just your uppercase name. It's got to be the whole name because that's the name that's contracted. I mean,
right. And it's the name that's given to you by your parents,
right,
and then solidified by the state. Which is on that topic, just to throw a little one out there. We didn't get to talk about the marriage certificate this time with Paul Hansen, but another interview we will. But I just want to say this. Who gives the right to be married? Who constituted marriage? God, right, Sam?
Come on, man.
Right?
Of course.
So here's my question, everyone. Why do we ask the state for permission to be married if God is the one who gives the right?
I didn't get that. Like, I remember when my wife and I were going to get married, and all of a sudden it's like, well, you have to have a license.
Right.
And I was like, what? Like, I didn't get it, but I was like, okay, I'll pay the $20 or whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, we were getting married. We didn't know. We were all excited.
We were like, we got to jump through the hoops and have this done. But, what do they say in the vows? Don't they say it in the vows and by the state? Or
no, the presiding, the judge or the pastor will say, now by the power vested in me by the state of Ohio or the state of New York, or if it's a pastor, say by the power and authority vested in me by God and by the state.
But it's always the state.
I now pronounce you man and wife. Why do we need the state's permission? We don't need the state's permission, right?
Right.
I mean, if God is the authority, why am I giving the state authority over me? I guess is the question.
Right. We've obviously contracted.
Yes. So okay. Anyway, that's a discussion for another time. I just wanted to crank your wheels for a second there.
Anyhow,
so Dr. Hoven.
Yeah. So there was a little nugget there.
Yeah. Well, a couple little nuggets.
Well, yeah. So first off, you could hear how surprised Daniel and I were because we've been we feel almost like we've been investigative, sort of.
For the last year. We were trying to figure out what happened because we were able to verify pretty quickly that he didn't do anything wrong as far as not paying his taxes.
And if you read some of the things, even on again, I hate to quote Wikipedia, but if you read some of the stuff that Kent Hoven answered, he pleaded incomprehension to the charges. He said he did not understand. There was some obvious legalese and lingo that he understood.
Right, and to define that, I do not understand, everyone. When a judge asks you, these are the charges, do you understand? And you say yes. You're not saying yes, I get it, I comprehend, it makes sense. You're saying yes, I choose to stand under your authority.
Right.
You understand someone. You were standing under. Mm-hmm. And that's, to a normal person, Ken Hoven sounds like a madman. But if you understand the definitions,
but it's just like that position of I plead guilty or I plead innocent.
Right.
Like what option is there? Why are we pleading? Why should we? I thought we were innocent until proven guilty.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of things that don't make sense about the legal system, but we're going to try to make sense of it in this show. How about that, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, we tried, and we'll try to make more sense of it as time goes on and we interview more people. And
so on to Hovind here. So basically, you heard Daniel and I basically get really excited for a second there because it caught us off guard that Paul J. Hansen is
the CEO of Creation Science Evangelism, which we thought, at least I was under the impression that his son Eric bought CSE and turned it into Creation Today, which, by the way, I would also, I think, endorse Creation Today and the ministry they're doing and sharing the gospel. And we hope to get Eric on here to talk to him about his creation ministry, not necessarily his dad, but just the ministry that they're doing and that work.
Yeah.
But no, so to come to find out, creation science evangelism is still a separate entity that's just waiting for Kent.
Well, and another thing about Kent Hovind and creation science evangelism is that he never copyrighted a single thing.
Right.
Because that would be a contract.
Exactly.
So when you copyright something, it's not really even yours. You're just letting them own it.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll pay you royalties through whatever you're publishing or whatever it be that they keep track in their system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually, you think of it as a good thing, and I'm not saying it can't be a good thing. I come at this from the musical angle, so I understand, like, if you're an artist, and you're getting paid all these royalties in the system.
But I think from Kent Hovind's perspective, he's looking at, and he says it on his own tapes, copy this, cut out what you don't like, give it to your friends. He didn't copyright it because what is he talking about? He's talking about the gospel. He's talking about the word of God.
Right.
And you know what? You can't copyright that.
I don't think you can really, it's hard for me even, again, as a musician. I like to think, I compose these songs, but I don't believe for really 1 second that I'm doing it. I'm just being used by Christ.
Yep.
I mean, it's the gift comes from God. So who am I? I'm just,
It's a quote
an
a
instrument
Christian song. Who am I? Okay, that's not going.
All right, that is going in.
Oh dear. Anyway, okay, so he is the CEO for Creation Science Evangelism, and the other nugget, which Sam and I have been racking our brains, what did Hovind do wrong when he went to court? And like we said, it's been complicated, so we've had a couple theories, but
he hired a lawyer.
Yes, he hired a lawyer.
Yep.
He shouldn't have hired a lawyer. That would have kept it all simple. Because what happened was his lawyer stood up, and what did Paul say? He said, or the judge called on the lawyer for what is your defense? And the lawyer stood up and basically said, no contest. There is no defense.
Right.
No defense, Your Honor.
That's exactly what he said.
And he just hung Kent out to dry. And at that point, he had contracted with the court. He'd gone into it, and there was just no getting out of it. Now, there have been many other inconsistencies and just blatant willful ignorance, or not even that. I don't know how you would describe it. If you go on and you look at a bunch of Kent's blogs, I think it's the 2 Peter 3 blog, it talks about all this documentation and paperwork that should have been signed and forwarded by the judges in order to keep him incarcerated, and it was never done. And oh man, it's just so obviously done deliberately. And
it's really just so sad that he's been demonized, along with somebody like Fritz Springmeier, for instance, who also served time in prison, for doing, something kind of polar opposite, but, calling out the system. I mean, he was talking about mind control versus, creationism. But I think all Dan and I would ask is that, if you're listening right now, check more into this for yourself. Because, Dr. Hovind was really trying to do the right thing. And I really believe that he did a lot more right than a lot of us do. So
I think he's, in my opinion, I think he's done the right things. And before if you guys are hearing this and you just want to write him off, go look at his seminars, go look at his debates. He is not rash in his debates. He is not unkind. He is loving. He is truthful. He's a great speaker, true. But his heart is for the gospel. At the end of every presentation, he's given the gospel. He's talking about Jesus Christ. This is what he does. And I just have to ask, I have to wonder, how many Christians do you think sold out the Apostle Paul when he became imprisoned? And oh man, and that's just an interesting story how Paul actually willingly, if you've read your Bibles and know the story, he willingly submitted himself to the legal jurisdiction so he could share the gospel and get to Caesar. So that's just a whole other story. But yeah, so anyway.
Man, that was a great episode.
That was a great episode.
I really enjoyed that.
We hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did.
And when we say, what an episode or what a great episode, this isn't about us. This is about our guests. This is completely an enjoyable experience because of who we talk to.
Right.
It's not because of us. And the only reason we're doing this is to shed some light on the truth.
Right. And you guys remember,